Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Off the Dome Sports Podcast, your favorite sports podcast where two sports lovers sit and give their hot takes.
Off the dome.
I am Redfish.
And I'm ReBo Hustle.
And we will be steering this ship today. Today's going to be a shorter episode where we're going to be covering a team very near and dear to our hearts, as you can see on the screen right now. Before we get into that, just want to say follow us on the X, _Dome Pod, where you can keep up with all of our news and all of our videos, all of our content we're putting out, as well as keep up with the Know at Be in the Know, KNEAUX, the only way to spell it. Make sure to follow them on the X as well as Instagram and Facebook, the Know Network. We have a lot of fun videos coming out with them. Recently, we did an interview with Sherman Wilson, LSU Director of Player Retention for their football program. An outstanding human, outstanding role model for what you think you should be, and somebody who we know is going to drive this program to success. So we're really excited that we got to talk to him. That's out now. If you want to check that out on the Know's YouTube channel. Also have some more interviews coming out soon, so make sure to stay tuned for that. And the best way to stay tuned is on our social media. So make sure to like, comment, subscribe here on YouTube, follow us on Twitter. And without further ado, LSU baseball. ReBo, take it away.
Heartbreak. Just heartbreak. Last night was tough.
Yep.
Had a chance to win it. Freshmen are going to freshmen, for being honest. No one should hold anything against Jake Brown for not catching that ball. But that would have sealed it. That would have been able to get us out of that inning, put us in a good spot to win the game. But yeah, we're just here to recap the whole season, what we did right, what we did wrong, what it's going to look like looking forward, and with the draft coming in about a month, what guys can we expect to get drafted and what guys can we expect to stay on this team.
Yeah, before we move on to the full season, I do want to talk about last night, like you said. For anybody who's holding this over the heads of Jake Brown and Gage Jump, you obviously didn't watch the past 2 weeks. Jake Brown hit a homer in the earlier game. If it wasn't for Jake Brown stepping it up at the plate in the NCAA tournament, we wouldn't have even made it to where we were.
He had a homer in the second of that game.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's not like Jake Brown was this player who we've been hoping to bench all season. He was a guy who emerged as a true freshman and solidified a starting spot in center field for the Tigers, and that means a lot. So we know there's huge things ahead for Jake Brown, and he's only going to get better in the field, and he's going to get better with the bat in his hand too. So we're really excited to see what Jake Brown does in the future. Gage Jump was our ace from the midpoint way of the season and really just never faltered. Yes, did he allow
2 runs
last night in relief? Yeah, he did, but he also pitched 50 pitches on 2 days of rest when Jay Johnson called on him to come in there. So you have all these players who are willing to take a step forward and willing to take a shot on themselves, and have proven to the coaching staff that they're good enough to play at LSU. So it's not like you're having these, random bench players come in and try to do something. These are proven guys who we know are going to not only, get better in the future, but end up making a mark on the league someday. So whoever's blaming Gage Jump, Jake Brown, do people make mistakes? Yes, but also they were a big reason of why we got here, so don't blame them now that we're out. Full season on recap. I'm going to take the first pro because it's something that I was really passionate about a couple episodes ago when we talked about it, and that's Tommy White's fielding ability. Before the season, he was looked at kind of like Jacob Berry was 2 years ago for us, where it was like he's a DH in the league, but he's only playing the field because he has to prove to the league that he can play the field. And now Tommy White stepped up, was one of the best defensive third basemen in the SEC. Flashed the glove a lot. Of course, he didn't fall short of a couple errors, but everybody does in baseball. I mean, you're playing a sport where if you fail 6 out of 10 times, you're the best player with the bat in his hands. So, Tommy White really, really showed to me not only can he hit 24 home runs a year, not only is he going to bat 350, not only is he going to hit 85 RBIs, but he's also going to hold up his end on the defensive side. And I was really impressed with Tommy Tanks.
Yeah, and for our second point, the absolute step up from the freshman this season. Stephen Milam impressed us from the jump. from the defensive side of the ball, and now later in the year, he's become one of the clutchest bats that we have. I mean, you walk off a South Carolina team that is, I believe, still dancing in the tournament now. You walked off them in the SEC tournament, and you walked off Wofford 5 days later.
First LSU player to ever hit 2 walk-offs in the same season, let alone a freshman.
Yeah, and then Brown came in as a pitcher, number 1 player in the state of Louisiana, and just impressed with his speed from day one, his defensive ability, and it's kind of humorous that the biggest knock on him now that the season's over is his defense, and that's why he got on the field.
Yeah.
And then Larson, a guy that I didn't buy into right away because I love Ethan Fry, and I thought that he deserved that spot. But Jay Johnson's never wrong, and he'll continue to prove me wrong. And Larson played an amazing outfield, threw a couple guys out at the plate, took professional at-bats every time he was up to bat. Just love to see the freshman hype, and they lived up to it.
Yeah, Jay Johnson is a fantastic ball coach. I mean, there's no doubting that what he did with this team was nothing short of spectacular. So never doubting any of the moves he makes, especially with the class he brought in. You look at guys like Milo and Brown, who really were some of our best players all season long, and then Ashton Larson came on as of late and really held down defensively. You know, he wasn't the best batter in the world, but I think defensively Ashton Larson proved himself to be a really reliable piece out in the field. And, you know, I think now we have our right field and center field set for next season. And like you mentioned, Ethan Fry is still there. Paxton Kling is still here, so we have room. Josh Pearson may be back as well, so we've got outfielders for days, and that makes me feel really good. Next point, Griffin Herring. I mean, not much more can be said than he was our best player down the stretch. When he would come out of the pen, you always felt sure that you were in a good spot. And not only that, but to be the guy to go and throw, 6 innings?
74 pitches or something.
74 pitches to get us in a spot where we could still compete to make it to a super regional after being a closer basically all year long. And not only that, but being the best closer in the SEC, if not one of the best closers in the SEC. He was phenomenal, and a guy who Jay Johnson really relied on, a guy who the fans fell in love with easily, and a guy who we hope to see back next year, although we don't know that for sure.
Yeah, and then the two cons or bad points of the season kind of go hand in hand. The slow start in the SEC, started off 3-12, and that was kind of because of the inconsistency at the plate, lack of confidence. Once we got hit in the mouth, we weren't able to answer. And that's the one thing that you saw this LSU team build on in the SEC tournament. They got smacked in the mouth going down 8-0, and then they answered. And so we kept expecting that, and then you see it evolve throughout this regional, and then you smacked North Carolina in the mouth, and they were also able to answer.
Yeah.
But yeah, the fact that we were able to clean up the one thing that really hindered us the most was the most impressive thing this year. I know we didn't get the storybook ending like we wanted to, but only one team does. And so I don't count this season as a failure. You had some great evolution from freshmen. You had some great evolution from sophomores and a bunch of draft-eligible guys that prove their way that they should be on a minor league team at least.
Yeah, I mean, speaking to that slow start, you know, to go from a team that was 3-12 in the SEC after winning a national championship to then getting, 43 wins on the season, and being one inning away from a super regional after the past 3 years where the national champion didn't even make the NCAA tournament. So that proves a lot to our resiliency and our coaching staff and what we did as far as developing players with 3 true freshmen in the lineup in the last month, and you know, guys who were never supposed to be relied on coming out of the pen, or even Gage Jump, you know, being our ace like that. A lot of guys stepped up and stepped into roles that they didn't expect to be in, but yet did it very consistently and did it well. But the inconsistency at the plate, I think that's ultimately what cost us. You can blame Gage Jump all you want. You can blame Jake Brown all you want, but you can't score 3 runs in a regional championship game and expect to win that game when you're playing the number 4 overall seed in the tournament. The fact that we were even able to hold them to 4 runs with them scoring 2 in the last 2 innings is phenomenal on its own. That speaks to what our pitching staff has done recently and what I think they'll continue to do with Nate Yeske in the locker room. But moving on to the players who we might never see in a Tigers uniform again. Obviously, top of the list, a guy who we definitely won't see in a Tigers uniform again because he's going to be one of the first 30 names called in a month when the MLB draft comes up, and that's Tommy White. Transfer from NC State, came here, won a national championship, and made his mark as one of the best Tigers in LSU baseball history.
Yeah, and then you got a run of seniors that definitely cannot play in the Tigers uniform again, and Christian Little, Will Helmers, Milazzo, Travinsky, Ben DePolt, and Nate Ackenhausen. A couple of those guys are going to get their name called. A couple of those guys won't. I would love to see Will Helmers get his name called after having one of the craziest last 2 weeks as a Tiger. I mean, he didn't even make the roster last year to when we won the national championship. And just for him to come out and be dominant for 5 innings at a time and have a fire lit under him that he wants to keep playing. Milazzo, it's up in the air. I don't know what he wants to do. It's going to ultimately boil down to what he wants to do just because of how good his bat was in the regional and how great of a defensive catcher he is. Of course, Hayden Travinsky also balls in his court. People are going to bet on the bat if he decides to go pro. Nate Ackenhausen absolutely will be pro. You just don't find a left-handed pitcher out of the pen that has the confidence that Nate Ackenhausen does. And unfortunately, Ben DePolt probably won't enter his name into the draft.
Yeah. Travinsky's a guy who we would love to see at least get a shot to make a roster. Just because of what he's meant to this LSU program the past 2 seasons. There was a reason he wore number 8. I mean, if you think about the number 8 in the baseball program, it's basically what 18 is for football. It's the leader in the locker room who also shows up on the field, and that's what Travinsky has done the past 2 seasons. And I'm kind of going to hate to see him leave, but that's what happens in college sports. Guys age out, and they have to move on. Will Helmers definitely had an upward trajectory towards the end of the season. Christian Little was one of the most improved players from last season to this season. Last year, he was probably my least favorite pitcher on the entire squad because of the inconsistency and the fact that you couldn't rely on him when he was supposed to be a 5-star prospect. And yet this year he came out, he showed he has all the tools necessary. It's just whether he can hit on them on an every given day, and more often than not this season he did hit, which was a huge improvement to see. I think Ack will definitely get a shot in the draft. Kind of reminiscent of Riley Cooper last season, but I think he's still developing and has a chance to really make his mark in the minor leagues. Looking at guys who are draft eligible who may or may not come back, you look at guys like Jared Jones and Thatcher Hurd and Gage Jump. When you say those 3 names, you're immediately like, man, what if we lose those guys? Because Jared Jones was, while he did basically only hit home runs in the 2 tournaments, those home runs came at what was that?
The best times.
Yeah, they came at the absolute best times. He's still working. He still struggles with the breaking ball every now and then, but he's one of the best pure hitters and best power we've seen coming out of LSU in a long time. Thatcher Hurd, I think if you get Thatcher Hurd on the right day, he is a 7-inning starter. And he proved that in his last game that he played with the Tigers. He came out and he dealed until he was taken out. He was fantastic. And then, like we said with Gage Jump, coming in as a redshirt sophomore who didn't even play last season, to be able to be the ace for the reigning national champions when you brought in a guy like Luke Holman from Alabama who was supposed to be the number 1, showed his resilience and showed all of the talent in the world out of Gage Jump.
Yeah, and so that leaves what's the question marks for next year, and with the guys that are going, the biggest impact guys are the pitchers.
Absolutely.
Christian Little's huge out of the bullpen. You have to find a way to replace him. Nate Ackenhausen, one of your most reliable guys out of the bullpen, got to find another guy like him. And if Griffin Herring decides to go to the draft, we might be in trouble.
Yeah, I mean, if you lose Little, Ackenhausen, and Herring, that's 3 of your 4 best bullpen arms. Hurd being a guy who is a borderline Sunday starter, midweek starter guy, who came out of the pen for us late in the season, and then your number 2 pitcher and Luke Holman and your number 1 pitcher in Gage Jump. There's a possibility that LSU loses all of those arms and has to completely rebuild the pitching staff. On the defensive / offensive side, as far as it comes in the field and with the bat, Jared Jones would be the biggest miss there if we can't bring him back. But like you said with Ethan Fry, kind of a similar player, big body guy who has all the power in the world, just needs to put his tools together. And I think with more opportunity, Ethan Fry can grow into that. That being said, I would love to see Bear Jones back in the purple and gold next season.
Yeah, just to replace your corners of the infield is going to be tough because Tommy White's definitely top 15 pick.
Yep.
And the fact that Jared Jones had such a good year and he's draft eligible as a sophomore, it'll be hard for him to say no. Or because, like, the further you go into your college career, the less money an MLB team is going to offer you in the draft. And so him being so young, he might get a good deal and it might be too good to pass up.
Yeah, I mean, if you're Jared Jones and you get your name called in late second round of the MLB draft, you can't turn that down because he is one of those guys that teams are going to take the upside on, considering what you saw from year 1 to year 2 growth, as well as the defense he has at first base. We saw that with Trey Morgan last season. Is not only was he a good bat, but he was fantastic at defense. And Trey Morgan's already been, I think, called up twice. I think he's already in Double-A. As a prospect that wasn't expected to make his major league debut for a while. So if Jared Jones can take that same route, it'll be tough to see him come back to college. We do have to figure out who's going to play those corner positions. I saw some rumors going around about transfer portal guys. Obviously, Jay Johnson loves the transfer portal, so we'll see what we do there. I did see something about maybe moving Braswell over to third. Don't know how that would work, but if he is to come back, because he is technically draft eligible, but I think he's another one of those guys who may forgo the draft and come back for one more year of development because of how much better he got this season from what we saw at South Carolina. I think we've still got a lot of potential next season when it comes to the guys with the bats in their hands. I mean, Stephen Milam will be back. Jake Brown will be back. So we've definitely got some guys to play. The question marks come in that pitching rotation, and those questions can't be answered today, but we'll be looking through the offseason to see how they do get answered.
Yeah, I think the portal opens like one of the last 2 weeks of the College World Series, and so I'm expecting Jay Johnson to address at least 2 pitchers in the portal, just because that's what you did last year with Holman and Jump, losing your 2 aces in
Paul Skeens.
Skeens.
Ty Floyd.
And Ty Floyd. Yeah, that was tough.
We can't be perfect.
I guess that's staying in. But yeah, I'm expecting them to make some moves in the transfer portal just because that's what we've done in the past. That's kind of the only way to keep reloading if you want to be competitive. I mean, yes, we have young guys that have great stuff and are just having trouble locating in Aiden Moffitt and Cam Johnson. But they're just going to continue to develop. Maybe one or both of them will be reliable bullpen pieces next year. But I just can't see them making a huge jump into being a starter where I can see Griffin Herring doing that if he decides to come back.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know what it's going to look like. Guys are going to transfer in. Guys are probably going to transfer out. We'll have some big-time freshmen coming in as well if they find their way onto campus. But, I'm really excited for what the Tigers have in the future. And the fact that we could battle through adversity and get to where we were last night after the beginning of the season where we were, it's a testament to the coaches. It's a testament to the players wanting it. And you saw that every single day that they took the field, that they were motivated, they wanted to win, and they're ready to build for the future. With that being said, I think that's going to wrap it up for this episode of Off the Dome Sports Podcast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe here on YouTube. Follow us on X, _Dome Pod, for all your favorite Louisiana sports content, and head on over to the No Network. You can check them out on YouTube for interviews, short content, reels, all the good stuff, as well as check out the website where there's written content. The podcasts are posted on there, and you get to know a little bit more about the network as a whole. So make sure to follow them on all social medias as well. I am Redfish.
And I'm ReBo Hustle.
And we will see you next time.